We'll start in just a few minutes, but welcome back to Microsoft Excel. All right. Well, welcome back to Excel. If you haven't yet, please log into your office. And today we are going to work along with some worksheets again and a workbook. But this workbook is for a business and is to keep track of their inventory and to do some calculations to show what's been going on with the business. So the first thing we need to do is create a new Excel workbook. So I'm just going to do it this way this time. I'm going to click on Excel. So now that I have a few lessons worked on in my Excel, you'll see they're starting to show up below. And I'm going to click New Blank Workbook. And it's not going to come up. I try to create workbook. Yeah. Yeah. So my Excel is not cooperating. Let me just try Word here if I get the same thing. Huh. All right, go figure. So my Word will let me open a new blank document, but not Excel. Let me try it again. Yeah. Just Excel's going bonkers. So I am going to sign out and then log back in. So it asks me, which account do I want to sign out of? You can have multiple accounts on Microsoft 365. I only have the one. So I'm going to create a new tab. So what I did is I right-clicked on my sign in and it creates a new tab. The reason I want to do that is just, it could be this tab is filled up or something. So it's a good idea to close the windows. Technically, I should just start a new window, but I think this is going to work. Let me put in my password. Let's try Excel again and new blank document. And there it goes. All right. Well, like I say, if at first you don't succeed, maybe parachuting is not your thing. Let me try another option here. All right. Let's just try this here. Yeah, I'm getting the same thing here. When I try to log in, actually it lets me log in. And in fact, I could open the Word document, but just not Excel. Okay, and if it says you don't exist, try closing your browser and starting up again. And if it still doesn't, try rebooting your computer because that'll reset all the cookies. Okay, I think, yeah, here it goes. So I'll tell you what I did in just a second here. So I've been using Firefox as my browser. What I did is I switched over to Microsoft Edge. So I don't know if this is true, but my theory's always been Microsoft Edge probably works better because it's Microsoft working with a Microsoft product. Like I said, I don't know if that's really the case, but it seems that way. So the other option I had is to restart the whole computer, but then I would lose my Zoom meeting here. So I didn't want to do that. I have been told you should not have more than one browser on your computer, but I've never really had problems with it unless maybe that's what's causing this problem. But it's helpful, like in this case, when Firefox is having problems. You can see this now. I went to Microsoft Edge and I use the in private mode. So you'll see in the upper hand corner, it's marked in private. Right up here. So that also turns off some of the cookies. And that's just kind of a way around it. What I probably really need to do is just restart my computer. So that does happen once in a while. And of course, it happens when you really don't want it to happen, when something important is going on. It seems to know to do that. But okay, so I did get my new workbook here. And I am going to save this. As Excel 3. And I want to call this our business inventory. All right, so once it comes up, we're going to go back to the email and open the link. Here, Excel 02 Retail Store Inventory Report. And I think I have a theory. The email I used to open it is called Juno. Juno is a free email, but it's heavily ad-based. And I have found leaving Juno open will sometimes slow things down. So close that. Oh, now we've got a little notice. I don't know if you've looked at your Outlook, but this came over in an email in Outlook, how they've updated the privacy options. And here we go. So what this is, it's a list of inventory for different items being sold in a store, but it has 3 locations. So what I'm going to do is down below in the lower left-hand corner, you should see we have 3 tabs. So we're going to copy each of these. Start with Patterson. So click on the Patterson tab. And I'm going to go down here to G27, select and scroll up. Or you can do it from top down. Either way, I'm going to Control C to copy. And then I'm going to switch over to my now working workbook and just paste. And here it comes. So I'm going to go down below And I'm going to create or change the name of the worksheet from sheet 1. I'm going to double click on the word sheet 1. I'm going to call this Patterson. This is the Patterson store. And then while I'm here, I'm going to create 2 more worksheets in my workbook. So sheet 1 and sheet 2. And all I had to do is hit that little plus and up it comes. So I'm going to rename sheet 1 to be Turlock and sheet 2 Modesto. All right, so I've got Patterson copied over. Now I'm going to go back over. First, I'm going to bring forward Turlock so it's ready to receive. Then I'm going to switch back over to the original, click on the Turlock tab, and eventually it will show up here. I'm going to hit the refresh button. There we go. Refresh is kind of like a restart. It's a half restart. So by hitting refresh, it refreshed my page, and sure enough, now Turlock will show up. So I'm going to select A1 down and scroll down. This one's going to be a little bit longer. So I'm going to go to I-61. Control-C to copy. Go back to the Turlock tab and paste. Then, as you might imagine, I'm going to highlight the Modesto tab so it comes forward. Switch back over to my source. Click on the Modesto tab, and this one came up a lot faster. So I'm going to go from A1 down to G62. Switch back over to my Excel workbook and paste. There, it's done. Now, real quick, I'm going to jump over and I'm going to close that window that had the source material, just because that might be one of my problems. It's slowing down the computer. All right, I'm going to click on Patterson. Let's start on the Patterson store. And here you'll see we have a set of data. And basically what it is a list of different items they sell in the store, the sales price for the item, the current inventory they've had, additions they may have had, like additional products coming in, and sales. And then we have to do some calculations to figure some of this data out. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to select all. So I'm going to Control A, but you can do it just by selecting the same data. And I'm going to change the font. So I want to use Arial. Arial is a bit heavier font, but it is a sans serif font. I lost my selection. I'm going to make it 12 points. So just to enlarge it like that. So in doing so, now I can't see all of my data, which is all right, because we know to widen up the column. So I'm going to go here. Column A looks good. Column B needs to be stretched out as a description, so it's going to need lots of room. And right about there, yeah. Sales price is a little crunched together. I'm going to bring that out. And then starting inventory, I'm going to bring out just enough so I can see the word starting in inventory. And then additional, same deal. The thing is, in my additions, see, it's only like 1 or 2 digits. Well, these are all 1 digit even. So it doesn't need that much room. What I need room for is the word additions, and then sales, and then ending inventory. Okay. You may have noticed in these labels that on starting inventory, see the word starting is above inventory? That's called wrap text. And the computer automatically did that. So when I click on the words starting inventory, you'll see at the top up here, it's been depressed for me, that we have wrap text. I'm going to turn it off and watch what happens. So if I turn it off, it's trying to put it all on one line, and I have to stretch it out this far to get that. So if I use wrap text, it will increase the height of the line. So you see now, this row is wider than the row above it and the row below it. But it fits them on top of each other. And then I don't have to make it so wide. And the same is true for ending inventory. It's not true in sales, not true in additions. I could hit wrap text for additions. It wouldn't change anything because there's only one word. All right, so that's very common, especially with heading of rows. You do want to use that wrap text because otherwise, see how spaced out it gets? And we're going to add some more rows, and they would just be too far apart. So I'm going to undo and undo. All right, speaking of this row, column 8, row 8, I want to make that bold, underline, and centered. Oops. Here we go. And I'll make them centered. When they're wrapped, you don't see a lot of centering. And when it's tight, like in sales, you don't see much centering, but sure do in description. So it centers it again based on the column, in this case, column B. All right. So the name of our company is Voyage or Travel. I'm going to select cell A1 down to A2, all the way over to G2. And I'm going to use that tool we used yesterday, the merge and center. You'll notice not only did it merge all the rows across, but it did the rows up and down. So we did A1 through G2. So now when I increase the size, you'll see I have 2 rows to work with. So I'm going to bring it up to 26. And I'm going to make it italics. So the computer's treating this A1 through G2 now as one cell. You'll notice I didn't have to click on the words to make it italics. I'm just clicked on the cell. So it's a little different than Microsoft Word. If you're clicked anywhere in the cell, that'll count. And like I said, this is counted as one big cell now. All right, for Patterson Store inventory, I want to increase the font to 14 points and make this bold as well. So it just stands out a little bit more. All right. So now we're good to go. At the bottom of my list, I want to include totals. So I'm going to type in on cell B28, totals. Now it's way over on the left. I want it right align. So I'm going to use align text right and make it bold. And then under each the bottom of each column, I want it to do a total. So I'm going to tally it up. So I'm going to use sum. When you're using the larger ribbon here, it went from the word sum now to auto sum. They're the same thing. It's just a little bit smaller now. They call it auto sum. So I click it and it lassos the numbers above. Good. I want to do the same thing for starting inventory, additions, sales, and ending inventory, even though we don't have anything in there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill handle it over to the right. You know how yesterday or the first time we fill handled it down? You can also fill handle it over. And as long as it's the same thing, but in a different column, the computer will adjust. So you notice here on mine, first sum, it said sum C9 colon C27. Sure, that's exactly what I wanted. Now, because I fill handled to the right, it adjusted. Now it says at the bottom of column D, sum D9 through D27. And the same for E, same for F, same for G. So the computer realizes that you're bringing these sums all the way across and it adjusted. Could I have hit auto sum each time? Sure. But why not let the computer do some work here? So you can do that and it will adjust. Next week, we're going to get into what are called absolute formulas where we keep it from adjusting. Sometimes you don't want it to adjust. But in this case, that's just fine. That's great. Okay. So now we're ready to start doing some math. I'm going to click on column E, and I want to insert a column. So I'm going to go up here to my insert menu. And let me try it again here. Insert sheet column. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I want to do the value of the starting inventory. So this time I'm going to type in starting inventory value. And you'll see a couple things happen. One, it did the wrap again, the word wrap. That's because we did the entire row and told it word wrap or bold and underline the entire row, and then word wrap when necessary. So that's what it's doing. It's word wrapping. And I also carried over the formatting without us having to use the format painter. Anything I put in column, or pardon me, in row 8 will be bold and italics. Okay, that's a good thing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a little math here. And I want to multiply the sales price times the starting inventory. So with any math, remember it starts off with an equal sign. And I'm going to do C9 times, and again in Excel, the asterisk is times D9. So 360. And I could look, oh yeah, that makes sense. 180 times 2 is 360. So it did the math. That's how much in the starting inventory value we had. So it's assuming we could sell everything at the sales price. I want this to be true for all of my items. So I'm going to fill handle this one down. So you can hover over that little black square in the lower right-hand corner and cell E9, click and drag down slowly and release. All right, I did it. And if you look at cell E22, you can see we've got a bunch of hashtags. We know what that means. If it can't show everything, it shows nothing but hashtags. So I'm just going to widen up the column, and there it is. Oh, there is something I forgot. So we want to do a total here. So we know the total starting inventory value. So I can go to my left here and drag the sum and the fill handle over underneath. And it worked. I could also click auto sum and it would have lassoed the column above and that would have been fine. Here's what I forgot. When we use the fill handle to move everything over, you'll notice it left it in the same formatting, meaning it's dollars with 2 decimal places. Well, starting inventory, that's not in dollars, nor are additions, nor are the items that are sold. So those we're going to change back to general. So I'm just going to click on them, select general, and then because that's the last maneuver I made, when I do the sales, I'm going to Control Y, which is basically redo. So it's a little shortcut. The other way to do it, I'm going to undo, is you see that I want this one, that one, that one, and that one. Well, here's the problem. I don't want to change this 84,000. That's right. That's supposed to be dollars. So what you can do is you can select non-contiguous cells, meaning this would be easy. So I could do this all in one shot for these 3 columns, tell it general, fixed, right? And then go back and do this one. I'm going to undo. Or I can click in column D, row 28, hold the shift key down, and then click on F28. Oh, pardon me. Did I say shift? It's control. Control, and then click, and then click, and then click. So I clicked F28 while holding control, G28 while holding control, and H28 while holding the control key. I'm still holding it. I'm going to release it because I'm done selecting. So see how it skipped over E28? Now I can go here to the style and do general. So that's a way to skip around and just select certain cells. So if you ever need to do that, that's called non-contiguous range. All right. So if you remember yesterday, I liked having an empty row in between our items and our totals. So I'm going to select row 28, insert, and insert sheet row. And it always puts the blank one above where you were. So you see 28 became 29. If I look at my formulas, it's still doing through 27. See, all of them are still working. If I added another item here and then another row, I would have to go back and modify my sum because it's not smart enough to figure that part out. It's pretty smart, but not that smart. All right, so now we have our totals there. So now we're going to set up our ending inventory. Speaking of non-contiguous cells, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do an equal sign. We want to add up the starting inventory plus any additions minus any sales. So, like I said, we start off with an equal sign, and we're going to start with D9. We'll put a plus sign in, and we're going to go to F9. And then sales means we lost an item. We gained some money, but lost an item. So I'm going to minus G9. And there we go. 2 plus 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3. Yep, that seems to work. See how that works? So in our formula, we can skip around, and it doesn't have to be continuous cells. You don't have to add up ones that are next to each other. You can add up anywhere on the sheet you like. So that gives us a good formula here. And I'm going to fill handle that down. You'll see down below our sum our total was blank, and now it's 159. You'll also notice that as it's doing the math, sometimes there are blank cells. Blank cells are accepted and assumed by Excel to mean 0. So I could put a 0 here and watch, the number won't change. If it's a 1, it would change, but 0 doesn't. So you can put zeros in or leave them out. In this case, they're left out. I figure if you don't need them, why have them? But some people did like to have them just to show that, this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't accidentally skipped. Somebody actually stopped and said, okay, we did the count. This is zero sales on this one. So you may encounter that. What I don't like about it is, oops, too much. I think when you have a list like this where there's a few items that have an entry, it makes them stand out more if you don't have all those zeros. Like in this case now, my sales here, see how they're all kind of visually jumbled together? So I just prefer to do that. But it just depends, it's whatever the boss says. If the boss says, put the zeros in, they're paying your paycheck, you put the zeros in. If not, then you can take them out. There are ways that you can set it up that if you want to show certain zeros sometimes and not, it's called conditional formatting. You can set that up as well. We'll get into that a little bit more advanced. But all right now. Okay, so we want to add one more column in column I, and this is going to be sales value. This one did not wrap text, so I'm going to click up here and click on wrap text. So to come up with the sales value, we need to know how many sales were made times the sales price. So that's pretty easy. It's going to be equal sign G9, which is the number of sales, times sales price, C9. You'll see I don't have enough room here, so I'm going to widen it up. There it is. I'm going to fill handle this down all the way. And again, some of my sales are too big, so I'm going to widen up the column. And there we go. When it did the math on this one, it put in the zeros, right? If you don't want to show zeros, you can change it to the accounting format instead of currency. You'll see on this time, on these, we use the currency. How can I tell? Like on sales price, $180, the dollar sign is right next to 180. But in the sales value, I change it up here to accounting style, and then it doesn't show the zeros. The good news is, if you ever want to change it back, you can always change it back to currency like that and get the zeros. But just to be different, I'm going to leave it for accounting. And that way this sheet shows you the differences between the two. So down below, I want to do a sum. So I can either do the auto sum or I can fill handle this to the right one more time. The only thing with fill handling is it carries over the same formatting. So I do need to switch that one to accounting as well. And my total's too big now, so I'm going to widen that up. All right, so it's looking sharp. So when I go back up here to Voyager Travel, you'll see I've added a column. So column I is not included. So when it's centered, it's a little off center. Well, we can fix that by clicking here with A1. I'm going to turn off the merge and center. It looks like my name jumped way out, so I can only read half of it, but that's okay, because now I'm going to select from A1 to I2 and merge and center, and it's going to fix itself. So once you set a merge and center, like on this title up here, you can always change it, and it doesn't hurt anything. Usually when you're working with text, you can make lots of changes without having anything go bad. Sometimes when you're working with figures, if I made a change here somehow, if I tried to merge some cells together, it can mess up my math. But in this case, it won't do that. All right, from cell A3 to I3, I want to change the color of those cells. So I want to make them an underline. So I'm going to make it a blue underline here, or a blue line. It's a blue accent 5, lighter 40%. And underneath that one, cell A4 to I4, I'm going to make it darker blue. So this one's blue accent 5, darker 25%. So see, it looks like maybe an ocean or a blue sky. Okay, so we've got our totals down below. Now we're ready to try a new formula. It's called average. So I'm going to type in the word average underneath totals. I want to make it just like my totals, so I'm going to click on totals, format painter, word average. It moves over to the right, makes it bold, same size. And I need to put in the formula for average. Here's the way average works, and here's the way a lot of these formulas work. It's going to look a lot like sum. In fact, if I wanted to, I could copy the sum, paste it in here, take out the word sum and type in the word average. And there it is. Our average sales price is $477.89. How did it do it? It added all these up together and divided by the number of items, which is what an average is, right? I also want to do it here for our starting inventory. And what's the average number of items we had on hand? So the other way to do this is, you can see this function up here, this fx. If you remember, this is our list of functions. And when I click on it, you'll see the most commonly used functions show up. And there it is, there's average. So I can click here and click OK. So now in my cell, it says =, average, and left parentheses. So it's waiting for me to select this items that are going to go in my average. And I'm going to select all these here. And hit enter. And you'll see it did the formula. Now the result is a little odd. Here's what happens with average is, we had a starting inventory of items. So you can't have a fraction of an item. In other words, we can't have 4.5 of these snowboards unless it's broken, right? But you'll see here, the average doesn't account for that. It does go into decimals. So there's a couple ways to fix that. The easiest way here is we have an option with these little zeros and arrows. These are decrease and increase indent, or a decimal. So I'm going to use decrease decimal. And you'll see I keep doing it. And it takes away some of those decimals. If I take it one more, so there's no more decimals, it's a 9. Here's the way this works. I'm going to use the opposite here to increase decimal. So our average was 8.57895 items. However, If I decrease it, you'll notice as it goes through each number, the rule is, as I decrease the decimal, the number that's left on the right-hand side either goes up or down. Let me do this again and find a, okay, here's a good one. So now it's 474. When I decrease, watch what happens. That 4 is going to, the last 4 is going to be cut off. And because it's 5 or less, it rounds down. That's why it stays 7. Now watch what happens if I decrease decimal again with that 7 on the right-hand side. I went up to 5 because 7 is 5 or greater. So that's the rule. 5 or greater rounds up, under 5 rounds down. And you'll see it does it all the way to we're at 8.6. And I round down, or I round up, I decrease the decimal, it rounds up to 9. So that gives us a whole number. It's an approximate, okay? Even though you can't have half of these products, don't break one in half, when you're dealing with averages, it is accepted to have a couple of decimal places because averages by their very nature. In fact, they'll say, okay, the average family has 2.3 kids. And you think, well, you can't have 0.3 kids. Well, that's because you're looking at the average of the total. So it's kind of accepted. The general rule is 2 decimal places. You can even go 1. It's up to you, but no more than 2, unless you really want to show off and you say, hey, boss, did you know that our average number of items in our inventory to start was 8.5789 items? And you sound really smart because you can go that far. But like I said, for the most part, 2 decimal points, and that'll do it. Okay. So, rounding can make a difference. Also, there are times later on where you might use this average in another calculation. And if you just look at it, like I'm going to do, decrease that decimal again. So it says 9, and I might subtract it from another average. And what'll happen is, even though it's not showing it, it knows it's rounding up in decimal. But when you do the math, I might have, let's see if I can trigger it here. So I'm going to say equal sign, this number plus 4.2. Okay, and I'm going to decrease the decimal. I'm going to change that to 4.8. So what'll happen is when it adds them together, see, it's going to say 13, even though we know this is a 0.8 and the 9 should be a, what was that? 0.6. So 6 and 8 are 14. So it actually should be 1 more. So that's what happens when you're using the rounding and the decimals. So just keep that in mind. If it ever looks like, well, that doesn't make any sense, it could be that. And so then the thing to do is just increase the decimals that are displaying, and then it will make more sense. Okay, let's carry this over. So whenever you want to access the formulas, you can always use this fx at the top here to bring it up. And as I said the first day, if you look, it kind of tells you what the formula should look like. So it says, use the word average and left parentheses, and then the first number and then other numbers. You can average just 2 or 3 numbers together, or you can do a whole list like we did. So I'll just say, okay. And then I'll just do the whole list again. And you can drag this one over too, if you wanted to, or even copy and paste. So there's our average value to start. Now we want it for our sales value too. So once again, I could go to sales value and use the function, or I could type it out or I can just copy, click on cell I-30 and paste. And you'll see now it's averaging column I, and that's correct. All right, so for one of our students here, the increase or decrease is not responding. Here's what can happen. Let me see if I can make it happen here. Let me put in a number. If you're in the middle of typing, the increase and decrease is grayed out. So if you hit the escape key, that'll stop it, and then you can see it. The other thing I do is I use the down arrow to go to the bottom and then go back up. So you can't be in the middle of typing a number or a formula for it to show up. So I don't know if that helps you, but that's one of the common things. And you do that a lot. I get so intent on the formula that I forget, like even here, that I'm looking at the formula. Okay, I want to decrease the decimal. I know that, and I can't find it, and it won't let you do it. So a lot of the tools are grayed out until you finish. Just hit enter, and that should take care of it. All right. So that gives us our totals and averages. Great. All right, it's 7 o'clock. We'll take a 10-minute break. We'll come back after break time. It'll be 7:10. And then we're going to apply our formats and our changes to our other worksheets. All right, so we're back from break. And now, as you can imagine, we want to take all the work we've done and apply it to the other tabs. In other words, from Patterson to Turlock and Modesto. So, obviously we don't want to do everything all over again from scratch. So luckily we can copy it. So the first thing is our header up here. So we've got Voyager Travel, Patterson Store Inventory, and the headings of each of our columns. Okay, so I'm going to select from A1 down to I8, and I'm going to copy. I'm going to click on the Turlock tab and click on cell A1. Now, this only works because these other two tabs are set up in exactly the same style. So I can paste here and it will bring things over, except I'll have some adjustments. If you're using the desktop version or the laptop version, what I could have done is when I clicked on the Turlock tab, also held down the Shift key and clicked on the Modesto tab, they would have both stayed gray. And then if I would have pasted here on one, they both would have been affected. So it's called grouping tabs. So you can do that. But in this case, on the 365, you can't do that yet. So I have to do each one individually. So now I'll click on Modesto on A1 and I'll paste. Okay, so let's go back to Turlock. So you'll notice our columns still need to be widened up, but that's okay. I can stretch out column B. I did a double click and it stretches the widest entry, which is the description down there. And then for the sales price, starting inventory value, some additions, and then ending inventory value. Okay, so in doing so, remember we inserted the starting inventory value. Oh, before we do that, let me go back here and change to where it's a Patterson Store Inventory to Turlock. In this case, it was, I thought, easier just to copy this because it carries over all that formatting and then change the name to the correct name rather than try to use the format paintbrush back and forth. Okay, so what happened was we inserted this column E on Patterson, but we haven't done it in Turlock yet till just now. So that's all right, because here's the data that got shifted over, and what the computer did for us automatically, we're going to do manually. So I'm going to click from E9 to F61, which are all these scattered numbers. And what these are the additions and sales. So I want to slide them over one. What I can do, there's a couple ways to do this. I can cut it and paste it, but also if I hover over the border here, I'll get 4 arrows. And if you remember from Word, 4 arrows moves. So I can click and hold it, drag it over one column, but not go down a row. If I did, they'd all be messed up. So I got to be on the same row when I start and let go. You can see how that shifted them all over. So ta-da. So then those are still correct all the way down. All right. So I still have a little bit of formatting to do. Column C is our dollar amount. So I said we were just being a little different this time. So we're going to change that one to currency. And then column E is going to be currency too. So let me undo. Do you remember I said we could select certain columns and certain cells that are non-contiguous? You can do that for columns as well. So I clicked on column C, held the control key down, clicked on column E, And then I'm going to keep holding the control key down and click on column I. Now, if I let go of the control, I can still push it down again and click on column I. So you don't have to redo it to start it. So this selects 3 non-contiguous columns, and I can switch those to currency. Now, I can't see anything yet because we don't have our calculations in here, but just to check it out, I'll throw in a number, and yep, there it is. All right. So now let's go to the bottom here. Remember, in the other tab, we had some totals. So I'm going to click back on Patterson, scroll down to those totals, and I'm going to select from B29 to I30. I'm going to copy these, click on Turlock, start at B63, and paste. All right, I need to widen them up because you can see my totals aren't big enough. And then you'll see we have a couple of divisions by 0. Well, that's okay, because we still need to make some adjustments. Here's the deal. You'll notice our sum is doing a number of cells, but because this column has many more items in it, it only started at 43 in the sum. So there's 2 ways to fix it. We really want to start at C9, from C9 to C61. So there's the easy way is just click on that 43 and change it to a 9. Okay, that also means our average is going to be off, and you could do the same thing this way. All right. The other way to do it is I could have just clicked the auto sum again, and it would re-lasso. And this time when it lassos, it would notice, aha, okay, undo. See, it lassos all the way to the top again. So you could do it that way. Personal choice. Average doesn't have its own button like that, so you would still have to go in. If you wanted to do it with by not typing it in, but see it visually, I can grab that little blue square and scroll up to the top. And just keep working it up like that. And see, that gets me C9 colon C61 too. So these 2 are both right for column C. And of course, I want them over to column D and E. So I'm going to click, select them together, click the fill handle, and pull them over twice. Now we're getting a division by 0 error. That's okay right now because we don't have our values in here yet. Once we have them in there, that'll be fixed. And then there's one more column, column I, that needs to be adjusted with both the totals and the average. So I'm going to select on, I selected E63 and 4, click I63 and paste. Okay. So again, F, G, and H also need to be adjusted. But because I know my sum here is correct in column E, I can just fill handle that across. And those are supposed to be numbers. So change the format back to general. And same here in column D, general. Just doesn't make sense to have dollar signs where there's no dollars involved. All right. So now we need to move over our formulas for the starting value and inventory and sales value. So I'm going to click on Patterson, scroll up to the top. If I want, I can do one at a time, or I can do the non-contiguous range by holding the Control key down and clicking on cells E9, H9, and I9. And I can copy those, click on Turlock, click on E9 on Turlock, and paste. Oops, that didn't work. So there's another difference between the desktop version and the 365. In this case, got to do them grouped together, no non-contiguous ranges. So that's okay. Just take me a couple more steps here, a couple clicks. So E9, copy, Turlock, paste. Good. For the second one, because they are close together like this, and they're contiguous, I can copy them together like that. And paste. And of course, sales value needs to be widened up here. All right. So now just fill handle down each of those formulas so that every item gets a calculation, and then widen the columns as necessary. Now these two, because they are contiguous, I can select them together. And remember, we did the math of the adding up and subtracting the sales. So this one is the calculation of dollar amount. So those two I can select together and fill handle down together, and this will work. All right, ta-da. Then you'll notice at the bottom of our screen here, remember those average errors, division by 0? See, they cleared up. And then the only thing down here is my D column. It's not supposed to be currency, it's supposed to be general. And this is where we decrease the decimal. By the way, speaking of increasing and decreasing decimals, it's always true of dollar amounts that there's a decimal there. It's the cents, right? But you'll see our average for column E is $2,396.15. However, you can increase the decimal on that. There you go, I did it by 2 places. So it's now 15.09 cents. So it's kind of like when you buy gas, you know, it's never $4.10. It's $4.10 and 9/10, which really rounds up to $4.11, right? So they have that 9/10 there. And that's kind of what this is. When you decrease the decimal, it will round appropriately. So not all numbers do that. You know, sometimes they do average out to the cents or to the dollar, and it wouldn't matter if you increase decimal. But there are times where that can be important. I notice my gas station, they always seem to round up to the nearest penny. I will say the local Walmart, for a long time, they didn't have the cash machines on self-service. You had to go and stand in line if you wanted to use cash. It was card only. Well, the excuse was, well, it was I shouldn't say excuse. The reason they said it was is because of the coin shortage. So they recently brought them back. And I noticed that when I paid with cash, I didn't have any change on me. So I just put in the bills. And what it did is it rounded down, even if my bill was $5.98 and I put in $6, it would give me the dollar back because it didn't want to give me any change. So they couldn't keep it, even though, only 2 cents difference. They instead rounded down. So all their machines were rounding down, and you basically got a little discount there for your checkout. So that's what the machines can do. They can round up or round down. In that case, somebody told the machines, always round down. All right. So see how we were able to carry over all our work from Patterson to Modesto, or to Turlock, pardon me. So now we're going to do it to Modesto. So I'm going to select A1 down to I8 again. I'm in Turlock, but I know Turlock and Patterson now are exactly the same because I just made them so. So I'm going to copy, click on Modesto. Oh, we already did that. I'm sorry. And paste. You could paste again, but it's not going to change anything except say Turlock store inventory. So I'll fix that now to Modesto. And now we're going to make the same maneuvers we did to Turlock to Modesto. If you are using the desktop version, a number of these things we could have done using the 2 tabs together. So just so you know, it does save a couple of steps. But because we can't group here, we'll just do them individually. And that's okay, it's good practice. And they'll go pretty quickly now because we're old school at this. So I'm going to widen description. Wind up the sales price. Starting inventory. Additions. Ending inventory. And sales value. Now you'll see this one, Modesto, has been slacking off. They didn't put any figures here on their sheet yet. So that whole thing about having to move the data over, we don't have to do in this case because there's nothing there. The only thing they put in there is their starting inventory. That also means some of our formulas are going to be empty right now, but that's okay. We'll set them up, and then whenever they get around to putting in their figures, it will do the calculations for them. So let's go back. We'll just use Turlock. So I'm going to copy cell E9, which is the starting inventory value. Go to Modesto and paste. Widen up the column. There we go. Go back to Turlock here. I'm going to select the ending inventory and sales value, copy, and paste under ending inventory on cell H9. So you'll see the sales value is blank. That's because they didn't add any sales figures yet, but they will. Now here's the advantage to them not doing that for us. Because these are all empty, we can now select all the way across. And under additions and sales, we're copying empty spaces onto empty spaces. So it's no biggie. So that means we can fill handle this all the way down in one shot. You'll notice the ending inventory is the same as the starting inventory because, again, no changes. Here's another way to do that, by the way. If you don't want to use the fill handle, I'm going to undo. You can copy. So I selected it. I selected cells E9 all the way through I9, and I hit Control C. So you see the marching ants. Then instead of fill handling down, I select E10 all the way down to E62 and then over to I62. And then I Control V to paste. And you'll see it works exactly the same way as the fill handle. In the first row, C9, you see it says C9 times D9. In the next row, C10, C10 times D10, and it advances each one forward. And you get the exact same results. So it's, again, personal preference, whether you want to use a fill handle or copy and paste. there are times where you might find it advantageous to use one or the other, depending on how many rows and how much you have to do. There is a quick way. I'm going to hit escape here. Let me undo it one more time. So right now we have 61, somewhere about 50 some odd items. So it's no big deal to fill handle down, right? But let's say we had 5,000. Here's what I could do. I could select here, right? You can Control C. I'm going to click on, let's say it's description. So B9. I can hold the Control key and push the down arrow. It takes me to the end of the list. So at this point, in our hypothetical 5,000, I'd be looking at row 5,000 something or other, 5,062. So then what I could do is select I62 over to E62. So it took me to the bottom of the list. And then I can use Control Shift up. It took me to the top of the list and then down one arrow. See how I still got the marching ants? So now I was able to select all of those blank areas, and now I can paste. So that would save a lot of time than trying to fill handle down for 5,000 rows. You can use the keyboard to maneuver around that way, and the computer will let you do it. So that takes a little practice, but once you do it, it saves a lot of time if you have a really long list, and sometimes you will. So see how everything's in there? All right, so now let's do our totals from Turlock. Go back to the bottom. Again, cell B63 through I64. Copy. Then in Modesto, I'm going to take advantage by saying, look at Turlock has the same, well, almost the same as Modesto. So this time I'm going to click on B63 here and paste here. And I'll show you why. If you look at my totals here, my sum, see how it went to C9? Well, if I go to the top, that is the top. So there is an advantage to having the same number of rows in Turlock as Modesto. But then you say, but now you don't have that line in between them. You're right. So that's the trade-off. I have to insert a row to have a blank row between the two. However, now I don't have to go back and fiddle around with those formatting issues or even the lasso of the sum, because I'm going to click on 63, row 63, insert sheet rows, and you'll see my formula didn't change and I got my blank row. So in that case, it's more advantageous to put it wrong, to put it where you don't really want it to end up. But for right now, because you're going to copy and paste, you can paste it in. You get the advantage of having all these formulas be exactly the same without having to change them, and then just insert the row. And the computer's smart enough to know, as it forces it down, not to add a new row there. So it's still only adding up to B62. And I can prove that by clicking on the sum, and sure enough. So that's another little shortcut. So you can do it anyway. It's always a good idea to go through, and I like to just trigger those boxes to make sure that they're lassoing the right numbers and everything. So you just want to double check. All right, let's go back to Patterson. So does that all make sense? There's another thing you can do to make your tabs distinctive. You could have a number of tabs going across the bottom. We have 3. So there's 3 sheets in our workbook. However, some workbooks can have 30 sheets. There are times where you want to make them look similar or distinct. So what you could do is, let's click on Patterson. I'm clicking on the word Patterson, my tab at the bottom. And this time I'm going to right click with my mouse. And we did this before when we were duplicating the sheets. I'm going to go to tab color, and for Patterson, I want to make it a light blue here. So I'm going to pick blue accent 1, lighter 40%. Then I'm going to click on Turlock and right click, go to tab color. This one I want to make green. So I'm going to use green accent 6, lighter 40%. And then Modesto, I'm going to right click, tab color. And this one will make a kind of reddish orange. So orange accent 2, lighter 40%. That way, see how they stand out? Let me right click on Turlock. The other thing you can do with this is, let's say I go back to my orange. Oops, that wasn't the right orange. I could make Turlock and Modesto the same colors. I can hit it right. And then what that's saying, or could be saying in our case here, is that the Patterson is the main office and the other 2 are branches. I don't think I got exactly the right color, but you get the idea. The blue versus the orange. Okay, so that's something you can do with colors too. It's a way to group them together visually just to make them distinct. By the way, a color change on the tabs is an undoable move, meaning I can click undo if I want to get it back to green, which I do just to make it look distinct like that. I'm going to right click on the tab color again. There is a drawback with the tabs, is they don't have all the features as the rest of the cells. So remember, like I said, we could change the cell colors, the background colors, and the font color. You can't change the font color on the tabs. So you are in danger of doing something like this, where you make it too dark in the tab color, and then you can't read the text. So see how Turlock gets really muddy that way. So again, it's a good idea to try to keep high contrast. So if you use one color background, try to keep it light. All right, when you print, those tab colors don't print. That gives us Turlock, Modesto, and Patterson. All right, so any questions on how we did all that? Let's make one more duplicate. So I'm going to use Modesto because it had the fewest items in it. And I'm going to right click and duplicate. It's called Modesto 2. I'm going to change the name to blank template. And then I'm going to change the tab color to no color. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, if these aren't enough colors for you, you can click on more colors. And remember how we did this in Word? There are 16 million colors from which to choose. You can take any color, add tint to it. You can make a shade to it, whatever color you want. But in our case here, for blank template, I'm going to make this one empty, so it looks like it's empty. So I'm going to say no color, and then I'll take it back. Okay, I'm going to slide blank template over to the right. So this, I've got all my items, my calculations set up. But I want to set it up for maybe a new branch, or if we're going to do something else in the following year. So I'm going to change this from Modesto store inventory to just blank store inventory. I'm going to select here from item number, from B9, pardon me, A9, over to D10 and down. To D62. So this is the information that was given to us. What we're doing is we're setting up a template so somebody else can come in, start with a new store branch and start keying it in, and the calculations will already be there for them. So to get rid of it, I'm going to hit the delete key on the keyboard, and you'll see it doesn't take out the cells, it doesn't slide any cells over, it just takes out the text. And of course, all our math goes down to 0. And because it goes down to 0, we're going to get a division by 0 error here. But again, for now, that's okay. So what we just did is we just turned our worksheet into a blank template ready to be filled up. So like I said yesterday, it's kind of handy to have one of those things. That way it's there in case you ever want to go back to the original style. If somebody's messed it up, you want to say, okay, what was the order before? It gives you reference. Or if you do start a new branch, you can do it here as well. I mean, you could start with this one, create a duplicate of this, and start keying in the information. I'm going to right click on blank template right now. If I don't want it to show up, this tab to show up in my regular list, I have the option here to hide. Okay, so I'll click on hide. And oh, it looks like it's gone. So what you can do when you want it back is you can right click on any tab and then click unhide. It will give you a list of all the hidden sheets. And we only have one tab called blank template. Click OK. And there it is. So that way, this template would stay out of the way and wouldn't, cause anybody to think, oh, what's this for? Oh, I don't understand that. If we have 3 branches, I don't know why we need a 4th one. Yeah, you don't have to worry about it. So we're going to leave this hidden. The only thing is, if you forget that you made it, then you'll never find it again because you won't think to go to unhide. But you'll notice, let me unhide it again. You can only find unhide when you click on the tab, and if there's anything hidden, then unhide will show up. If there's nothing hidden, you can see here, unhide is grayed out. So I'm going to click back on blank template, hide it. So that's all. You just have to remember that you made that in case you need it. I'm going to click back on Patterson. So that's kind of handy, especially if you're sharing documents or worksheets like this. If you have something that you're using only for like creating new ones, you can just hide them and then it won't get in anybody's way and nobody will question it until you're ready to use it. All right. Well, if there's no questions, we are done for the evening. So, of course, we won't have class tomorrow because tomorrow's Friday. So we'll be back on Monday and we'll be doing more Excel. And hopefully my Excel will be a little bit more responsive when we start. I'll be sure to reboot my computer before I start it up, just in case. So have a good weekend and see you next Monday.